Don't stop.
Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything at a Big Gay podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randalls Friedman. My guest today, when I got his bio and I started looking him up and trying to figure out who he was, which I do research on obviously all my guests before I interview them, I thought he had a really interesting background. He helps people that need help with that they have intimacy issues, or they have body positivity issues, or they have issues with their relationships, sexual intimacy issues. And I'm lucky that I have not had to have these type of counseling before, but I have friends that do need to talk with them. And the great thing about my guest today is that he actually works with men and women. So he's not just focusing on gay men. He's working with women. He's working with gay men, straight men. I believe he works with polyamorous relationships. So he's kind of doing it all. He's been featured in the New York Times and Out Magazine and some pretty major publications. And he's done a lot of interviews and stuff. And, he seems like a great guy where he can actually help somebody get through a difficult time in their life. Because if your sex life isn't where you want it to be, then that impacts a lot of things on your life. So, I have a couple of friends that are rediscovering who they are, I think, in a way at this point in their life. I think everybody goes through that at some point or another. But I have some friends that are trying to figure out who they are, who do they want to be with, what type of person they want to be with. They were in a relationship maybe for a while, and now they're single and they're exploring. I have another friend that's exploring and being a little slutty, or a lot slutty. I think if you are trying to figure out who you are at a certain point in your life, who you are sexually, who you are just personality wise. And one of my friends is also looking for a life partner. He was in a relationship for a long time, over 10 years, and now he's single, and he's trying to find the right person. He said whenever he ended the relationship with his husband, they're not officially divorced yet, but he said that he was going to wait a year before he actually decided, before he was going to start dating again or looking for somebody or going on, the millions of dating apps. But he didn't. I don't think he even waited a month. He jumped right back into it. He met many people over the last, I guess they've been separated for 6 months or more, maybe 7 months. And he's met a lot of people on the apps. And he has not, well, actually, as of today, he's going on a 4th date with a guy. So maybe he did find somebody, but he had to do a lot of exploring on who he was as a person, what he was looking for sexually, what he was looking for in a partner. Because his sex life, and I'm not saying his name because I'm not going to put his business out there, but if he's listening, he knows who he is. His sex life wasn't great when he was with his husband. In fact, he was pretty bored with it. And, I think that's normal for relationships to go up and down, but I think they were in the down, sex wasn't great for them for a long time, and they were not on the same page. I think one wanted to be more open because they weren't feeling satisfied, and the other one said that they didn't want to be open, but they really were. And they were just, and my friend knew about it the whole time and didn't think that the other one knew about it. And I don't know, it's a disaster. But my guest today is a person that could have helped them if they were together still. He seemed to help a lot of people. He has different courses that you can take. Again, he does men and women, straight, gay, polyamorous relationships, thruples, he does the whole thing. And he'll do one-on-one sessions, so you don't have to, but I think he offers these retreats. He does a lot of great things that helps people. And today's world is so complicated with relationships and sex because you have these apps where you could find somebody to have sex with in like 5 minutes if you wanted to. At least in the gay man's world, you could literally go on an app and meet somebody and have sex and be home, for dinner. I don't know. Um, I think that if you are looking for a relationship and you want to be, or you're in a relationship and you have intimacy problems, this guy, his name is Court Vox, and he's the guy for you. And listen to my interview, and I think he's a really great guy. He was a great interview. I think a lot of people need his services. At least I can think of several of my friends that can use his services or could have used his services of helping them with their, sex life or their body positivity issues, relationship issues. He's been featured in major publications and been on major podcasts. So enjoy the interview with Court Vox. Thanks for listening. Have you ever felt disconnected from your own body, like your mind and heart were speaking two different languages? My guest today helps bridge that gap. Welcome to Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay. I'm your host, Zach Randall Freeman, and today I'm joined by Court Vox. He is a somatic sex and intimacy coach whose work invites people to step into healing through touch, breath, and presence. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So tell me how you discovered somatic sex and how you discovered that this is a good therapy for you to kind of help people with.
Yeah. So maybe, I get this question a lot. So thank you for asking it. And I think maybe I'm going to reframe it a little bit of like why I continue to do somatic sex and intimacy work, which is, in the a little over 6 years that I've been doing this, the expansion that I see in clients and the feedback that I hear from clients is so huge and so big in terms of how it affects their personal lives, not just romantically, but with relationships with family and work, how it expands their capacity to use their voice to ask for what they want and to express their desires in life. How it changes partnerships, whether that, moves people along into leaving a partnership or it strengthens the bond of a 20-year marriage to move into the next phase. I think on my retreats and my community work, I think the biggest shock for people is just how incredible the erotic brotherhood is that's created when we come together in these really vulnerable, open spaces to dialogue and move and breathe and touch each other. So yeah, I think what continues to make me to step into this role as facilitator and teacher is really the kind of transformation that happens in my clients all the time.
Tell me about, before we started recording the episode, you said you have retreats coming up. You just did a couple. Tell me what a retreat is like and how, like, who's going to the retreat, how many people are there, and what's kind of the agenda?
Sure. So the retreat that I just finished it's the first time I ever offered it. It was an invite only for clients that I've worked with before. It was called Medicine and Eros, and it was combining psychedelic journey with erotic work. And so it was a really kind of edgy, big container, and it was so big and so full and beautiful. And I'll definitely offer it again, but it is for my more advanced students, for people that I have done substantial work with and I know can kind of handle that container. But the retreat that I have coming up is I'm going to work a retreat in Thailand for women. And then in December, I have a retreat coming up called Connect, which is a 20-person retreat for LGBTQ men in Joshua Tree.
Oh, wow.
And my retreats really range from 9 men, which is my 6-day, 6-night retreat, to Connect, which is 21 men. So it really depends on the format that we're offering. Yeah.
The psychedelic retreat sounds amazing. Like I want to do one of those. So like I've done some interviews with people that have done kind of the psychedelic journey and stuff, and they said it's just life-changing in a lot of ways. So
yeah, it was a big experiment because we'd never done it before, and erotic work is already sort of like on the edge, and then psychedelic work is like on its own edge, and to combine them was a big kind of experiment. And that was a invitation that I invited those people into, is like, come do this experiment for the first time with me, with kind of no promise. And, the outcome was a great outcome.
Awesome. So, how does the somatic sex kind of education differ from traditional therapy? And did you start with traditional therapy prior?
So I've been on this journey for a long time. In my 20s, I did a course called University of Santa Monica, which at the time was offering a master's degree in spiritual psychology. So this has always kind of been in my realms of interest, but I didn't start doing this work, start studying this until I was like 36, 37 years old, and then fully
Okay.
transitioned in 2019 to do this full time. But somatic sex education and somatic sex and intimacy coaching is different from traditional therapy in that we're not just talking. Processing through speech is part of it, but we're also learning through touch, experiential learning, as
Mhm.
well as body-based exercises, movement, breath, sound, exploring choice and voice, as well as placement of awareness. At retreats, we're using ritual and ceremony and different types of poetry to express ourselves. So, there's so many ways that we can express ourselves, and yet, in our day to day lives, we're not accessing most of them.
What kind of clients though, like, you're talking about a women's retreat that you're doing in Thailand. You have the men, 9 men or so to start off with, that can go up to 21. What type of person should kind of think about if they'd be a good fit for this?
Yeah, so I work privately with clients, and I also offer retreats throughout the year. So I think that the type of person that comes to work with me privately is a person that is not quite ready to be in group space yet.
Mhm.
They're feeling a little bit more protective of their energy, of their image, right? They're not ready to kind of come into community yet. But the type of men that usually seek me out range from like 30 to 80.
Oh, wow.
And I would say the average age is around 40. My average age of client is
Okay.
40, with both men and women. And then there's, the range in between. On retreats, I usually have, this last retreat, we had 6 decades worth of men there. So 20s all the way up into
Wow.
late 60s. Sometimes it ranges from, 6 decades to 7, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Because of the AIDS epidemic, we lost a couple generations of queer elders. And
Yeah.
this is really the first time we've been able to join in ceremony and community with one another in such a deep way, with so many generations present to learn from, to speak with, to be guides for. So it feels really, really special.
Have you thought about, like, are you kind of taking, I don't know, creating do you have a journal and kind of taking notes about what's going on? I mean, I think this would be so fascinating in a book at some point, in the future, just where you're kind of talking about how you've helped all these different people, the different generations, the different people that are coming. I mean, I think that's fascinating on its own.
Yeah, I do keep notes, and I do write quite a bit on my Instagram, and also I have an online community called the Body
Mhm.
Vox community, and I write daily there. And so, my writings oftentimes reflect the experiences that I'm having with clients and also in my personal life. And sometimes they're veiled because, I'm protecting the confidentiality of my clients. But,
Yeah.
if I were to write a book, which, is sort of on the radar for this year, definitely speaking about some of the really impactful stories that have come across my realm of my field of work. Yeah, that's definitely on the docket. So thanks for naming that.
Good. Um, do you ever, so after, let's say you do a 6-day retreat and you walk away from that, do you ever kind of stop and reflect on, like, how awesome it is that you've helped these people kind of overcome or just move to the next chapter in their life? Like, do you ever reflect on the good work that you're doing? Because I feel like a lot of people that do good things like you're doing don't always take a moment to kind of reflect back on the good work they've done. Do you ever do that?
You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. It can be challenging because sometimes I'm moving from one thing to the other. But you know, the gratitude and the overwhelming feeling of reciprocity is definitely in my body. always. And, when I do kind of back to back events, whether it's women or men, or if I'm doing a private going into a group event, it's a linear movement, right? So I am forever changed also, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm often taking things from that retreat into the next one, learnings and feedback and things like that, and making things different based on my own experiences. And so I don't always take a moment, sadly, to
You should.
well,
At the end of the year, you should definitely take a moment and reflect back on
yeah,
everything good that you've done, because it sounds like you're impacting and touching a lot of people throughout the year, and
yeah,
you should take that in. I mean, that's good karma coming back to you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm still getting messages from people. Just got a text before this from an attendee who is so grateful about his reconnection with his partner and just how incredible it's been to reunite after the retreat and share and come back together erotically. And so those messages really are such gold for me.
Mhm.
Also to see men connect with each other outside of retreat and go to dinner, go on vacation together, like the community and the friendships that are built, there's a lot of depth to them. And so
Mhm.
to see people together that has nothing to do with me, right? At created friendships at the retreats feels really, really good.
Awesome. I'm curious, whenever I got your bio, there is it's called surrogate partnership. Can you
Yeah,
explain what that actually is and how that is therapeutic?
sure. So surrogate partner therapy is a little bit different than my somatic sex education work or working just as a somatic sex and intimacy coach. It's a modality that was first created by Masters and Johnsons, and it's a really specific container in that I work with a licensed therapist and the client in a triadic model. So the client comes to work with me for experiential learning, and they process that experiential learning with the client through talk therapy. So it's
Okay.
a really beautiful container of being able to support the client from multiple angles.
Awesome. And how do you one of the questions, like, I was just kinda thinking about, how do you kind of maintain those personal boundaries whenever, you're being professional boundaries whenever you're getting into such deep emotional,
Mhm.
you're really pulling a lot of emotions out of people. How do you kind of stay in that professional realm?
My boundaries are pretty strict in terms of how I move into relationship with clients after working with them.
Mhm,
And I have to admit it's a bit tricky because there's so many wonderful men that come into my life through this work, through retreats, and there's a question of like, do I go to retreats that they are going to, and do I as a
mhm.
participant? And I haven't quite figured that out yet. That's still in process. But in terms of my relating to clients outside of container, I don't do that. It kind of erodes the container itself, and so I'm very
Yeah.
protective of the work and keeping those boundaries.
What are some of the things that, I don't know, like tips or guidance you would give people that are looking to kind of go to the next level with a partner? And my other question is kind of, whenever partners just discover in this that maybe they aren't meant together, is that hard for you to kind of deal with? Or I mean, I know it's hard for them, but I'm assuming you're kind of walking them through the process on how to separate if they need to.
Not necessarily. I think that I've been talking a lot about this recently, but there's a difference between relational trust and somatic trust. And
Okay.
you might be in a relationship with somebody for 20 years and you really trust them to get the car detailed and take care of the bills and the mortgage and take care of your life, your relational life and your family. But then when it comes to holding your body and trusting them with your body and touch, there is not a trust there. And so
Okay.
oftentimes clients, couples in specific are coming, and that's the piece that's missing is this somatic trust. And so it's a little bit of backtracking of where did the break begin, or
Mhm.
where is the break living in their somatic body, and is it possible to teach them new skills that will allow them to start to build another connection of trust when they are touched, and also to give that person skills to touch them. A lot of that is, if you're talking about tips, I think asking and listening, and there's a big thing people have around, I'm so intuitive. I know my intuition tells me, which is really
Mhm.
wonderful. And people do have intuition, but I think sometimes intuition is projection and we are wrong. And so
Yeah.
checking in when we have a question of like, is this something that you want? Is this something that you really enjoy or desire? And, having that person be able to feel safe enough to say, no, actually, I don't like this. I would like this instead. There's a lot of murkiness in that, specifically with couples, but also as individuals who are out there kind of in the hookup world. And there's so much around risking belonging and risking
Yeah.
losing love and risking losing connection. And so we endure a lot. And the work that I'm doing is really helping people to become sovereign and autonomous in themselves, to where they can speak those things without falling apart when somebody is not able to meet them.
And we'll be right back. Okay, now back to the show. Are you seeing more couples? I feel like most of my friends now are in open relationships. And are
Mhm.
you seeing more of that in the LGBTQ community now?
Not necessarily. I think that I'm seeing more and more straight couples move into open
Yeah.
relationships of all
I'm hearing
variations.
about that too, which I was like, it's
Yeah,
so untraditional, and I love it that they're exploring it.
yeah, and I think straight couples don't talk about it as much as gay people
Yeah.
do, and open relationship is a really broad term, and I think people who are looking to move into an open relationship of some kind of need to understand that whatever somebody else is doing is not necessarily what you need to be doing, and to create your own path, and to understand that as you're formatting what that looks like, it's going to be a little messy, and to
Mhm.
expect the messiness, to welcome the messiness, and embrace the learnings from all of that, so that you can formulate what works for you and what doesn't work for you. I think, just in my own relationships, I've gone from open to monogamous in the same relationship, because it's like, actually, what I need from you right now is to really hunker down with us,
Mhm.
and to have outside distractions doesn't make sense. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to want that forever. It might mean that I just need a little break from it, and I need to come back to you
Yeah.
and feel a little more safe and secure in our dynamic first. So all kinds of ways to play with open and poly relationships.
And whenever you have, so I have a friend, a couple that I'm friends with, and one is wanting to explore different kind of kinks and explore be more fantasy, and the other one is not having it, not into it, doesn't really want to talk about it. I think it could be the end of the relationship because the other one is so close-minded about it.
Mm.
What do you think? Like, how do you help couples that are kind of in that situation where one is like wanting to go off and do all this exploring and try new things, and they have these fantasies in their head, and they're like ready to let them out, and the other one is like conservative and like, no, I don't want to do any of that. So, what's your
Mhm.
advice there? And is that common?
Yeah, it is common. I would say, for couples coming to work with me, both of them have to be enrolled. I don't do a, half, somebody's coming.
Yeah.
Like when I do exploratory calls, I require both parties to be there and understand that it's an investment from both sides. I think when there is resistance, there is erotic there. And so to say to that person that having such resistance is that, if you were to just step into this a little bit, to be in the discomfort, to
Yeah.
be in the yellow place, there's a learning edge of resilience there that does have a reward if you go through it. I'll also say that for couples that are going to stay together in that dynamic, even if
Mm.
it lasts, that person that wants to go and do and be present and explore will start to resent the other person for continuing to yuck their yum. to continue to poop on their things that they find sexy and delicious. And so, you know, there's a lot of personal growth for both of those people, but
Yeah.
inevitably, if there can't be an understanding of, I'm going to allow my person that I love so much to continue to be themselves, right? Then there likely will be a break at some point.
So you've been kind of featured in a lot of big media outlets, and do you feel like the public today is getting more open minded with having conversations around, kind of sex and intimacy, and thinking about it being more healthy when they're talking about it? Or do you feel like, I don't know, like sometimes I think in this country, in the United States, we're pulling in more and being more secretive, but then I also think that there's the opposite side where people are more open about it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, it's tricky. It's hard for me to say sometimes because I live in Los Angeles and I live in this
Yeah.
world, and it's a little bit of a bubble. And, as I see sort of like what's happening in our government and politics of closing in on human rights when it comes to our bodies, specifically around queer people and women's bodies,
Yeah.
that the flip side of that is that the information on social media, the information on the internet is available, right? It's just sometimes it's weeding through the information to understand like what's real and what's not. There's a lot of
Mhm.
toxic information around masculine sexuality on the internet that I feel really concerned for young men learning from the likes of Andrew Tate and people like that who are
Mhm.
not setting a great example of what conscious sexuality looks for young men or men in general. It's very misogynistic, very homophobic. And when I
Yeah.
think about the type of sexuality and eroticism that I'm teaching, it is expansive. It asks us questions of like, who am I erotically in a larger context? When I started to move into this space, I recognize that I'm more of a pansexual, sometimes bisexual human, and I'm queer. I'm not that gay,
Mm.
and I'm still gay at the same time. So, there's.
Yeah.
I think when people have more choices and understand what's available, and that they can explore different bodies and different humans and different sexualities and gender expressions, that it starts to become a lot more expansive. And so to come back to your question, I think it's a yes and. I think there's always been a lot of interest in sex and sexuality, but I feel like it's
Mhm.
more on the pornographic side of things, right? If you look at, the top visited sites in the world, Pornhub is in the top 10, and there's a couple other ones in there as well. So we're all very interested in sex and sexuality. But when it comes to the erotic piece, right, not the pornographic, but the erotic, which is more of the feeling,
Mhm.
more of the embodiment of that energy, you know, people are less inclined because it does take effort to learn and unlearn a lot of things that we understand about sex.
And are you dealing with anybody, or do you ever talk with anybody to help them if they have like a porn addiction?
Yeah. Porn addiction is tricky. You know, I come at porn from one of my mentors, Don Shui, wrote a book called The Paradox of Porn. And it's sort of like holding a lot of things in two hands, right? On one hand, porn is a major outlet of expression for a lot of people around the world
Mm.
that don't have access to this. And so it's like, in one hand, it is a positive. On the other hand, it becomes the main source of that person's erotic or sexual outlet, or the shadow of that person's outlet, which is like, I don't talk about this. I explore my fantasies only through my visual sense. And when I'm coaching people through quote unquote porn addiction, it's like, can we be
Mm.
grateful that it was there? What did you learn from it? What did you garner from this relationship to porn? And also, can we explore how to use it in a different way that accesses your imagination, accesses your feeling body? Because so much of the time when we're watching, we're having a relationship with our eyes and we're feeling all kinds of things, but we're not really present with it. And so to bring a mindfulness practice into how we're watching porn, to watch porn from a more linear perspective, from a start to finish, as opposed to watching like the cum shot, over and
Yeah.
over, or watching the compilation of fucking or whatever it is that we're into the
Yeah.
most, because that's not sex. That's like one segment of sex. And then when we get into sexual encounters, we're not using our eyes. Most of the time, our eyes are
Yeah.
closed. And if we haven't been experimenting and heightening the other senses in our body, our feeling, our smell, the taste, feeling and understanding tension as it pertains to energetics in the room, those senses are more dulled. And it can be really beneficial for people to explore heightening those senses without your eyes. And so, telling somebody to quit porn is like telling somebody who's been an alcoholic for a long time to just quit cold turkey. It's like
Just stop drinking. Yeah. Yeah.
probably not going to happen, right? We have to delve into a lot that's surrounding why and how we can kind of move in with different expressions to support new areas of growth and new pathways to pleasure.
One of the things I read that you've studied rope bondage, and how do you? And then you're using kind of the modern hypnotherapy and breath work and movement. How are you kind of combining all that together to help someone? Can you give me an example?
Yeah. So rope is a really big part of my practice. I find that 99% of my clients really enjoy rope. And it's so interesting
Okay.
because I think there is this kind of already always listening that rope is scary, that it's,
Yeah.
that it's dangerous. And the truth is, it can be dangerous. There are dangers with rope that people should understand moving into it. And it's very sexy. It can be very connecting. It can be aggressive. It can be sensual. The rope, how I am teaching rope is it's an extension of our touch. When I'm tying somebody, it's an extension of my body, of my hands, and the rope has vibration in it. And so it's such a beautiful way to access surrender, to access connection, to access sensation, and to actually, a lot of people, their nervous system just drops right in. It's just like an immediate. So rope is a really big part of my practice. And look, there's not a lot of places that people can go and have an experience with somebody that they trust to take care of them,
Yeah.
trust that the skill set level is at a certain level, and trust that the care will be there to catch them as well. So, a lot of people will say, you know what, this is the time I'm going to explore this because I have the opportunity to do it. Somebody knows what they're doing. In terms of hypnotherapy and some of these other modalities, it's sort of like they're embedded, right? So hypnotherapy and meditation and mindfulness, they're kind of all in the same bucket. And
Mhm.
it's a tone of voice. It's asking people to step into themselves in a different way. And I can't say when I use them. It's sort of like these are toys in my toy box it's sort of like
Yeah.
my dashboard of what's available for me. And I
Yeah.
pull
Yeah.
them like as needed in moment to moment situations. And, sometimes I'm practicing meditation and sometimes I'm practicing hypnotherapy while somebody is in rope. So sometimes that's happening while they're sitting on my couch and I'm walking them through a meditation or a mindfulness practice. So it really just depends on the client who is here.
Yeah. And so you're based in LA. If somebody that lives in New York wanted to have you kind of talk with, I don't know, a couple or even a an individual, do you do it? Can you do it online, or does it need to be in person?
I work very, very rarely with people online. I sometimes take like 2 to 3 clients a year online, and usually that's in like a 3 to 6 month increment. And beyond that, I feel that if they don't want to continue doing embodied work in person, that we're probably not the right fit. As much as you can do online, it's exponentially more when we're in person. So
I could see that.
I do have a lot of clients that come work with me from all over the world: Canada, UK, New York, Chicago, Dallas, a lot of the surrounding cities or the coastal cities, San Francisco, Florida, who will come for my 3-day immersions here in Los Angeles. And, it's like a private retreat for them. And so, the distance hasn't been an issue mostly.
Awesome. Well, your website's got some fascinating things on it. So I will put your website in the description of this podcast or video so people can check it out.
Thank you.
And they can learn more about your retreats and coming and possibly talking with you about more stuff. So you've been a great guest. It's been really educational, entertaining. So thank you so much for being on, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everybody for listening. And if you have any questions for Court, can they contact you on your website if they want to?
Yeah, there's a contact button on my website. And if you want to book an exploratory call, there's a link there too.
Awesome. Well, you've been a great guest, and thank you so much for joining. And thanks everybody for listening. And be sure to leave a comment what you thought about this episode. Thanks everybody. Thanks, Court.
Bye.